Here it is. I love it when they get something right finally. But people say, where do you see anything that the sheriff is a Cleo? And I said, the Brady Bill. Because the BATF brought us those documents. They took them to the Cleos all across the country. Okay. Now, this is a threat of arrest. I told you I'd show you the proof. Under a separate provision of the Gun Control Act. You know what that's talking about? The Federal Gun Control Act of 1968 that was promulgated pursuant to the 60s assassinations of the Kennedys and Martin Luther King. Any person who knowingly violates the section of the GCA Gun Control Act amended by the Brady Bill shall be fined under this title, imprisoned for no more than 1 year, or both. There it is. I was looking at a year of jail or a $10,000 fine or both. Okay. And now we're moving into some other things. And this is Ronald Reagan talking about our tax system, that it reeks with injustice, fundamentally un-American, and deserves a rebellion. We totally agree with him. And how are we going to protect the American people from this criminal organization that has a list this long of congressional hearings of the crimes they've committed against innocent Americans? Who is going to protect you from that? Your congressman?
No.
Your senators? Oh, heavens no. Why would any sheriff allow them unfettered access in your county to any of you when we know the record they have? That check and balance system has got to be in place to stop this abuse. Anybody have a question about whether or not random audits are constitutional? Supreme Court has pretty much allowed it. They're not constitutional. They have no probable cause. They have no due process. There's no warrants. It completely violates the Fourth Amendment and guts the rest of the Bill of Rights as it goes along too. I know that's unconstitutional. I don't need to ask permission from somebody if that's unconstitutional. I'm going to tell them that's not happening in my county anymore. Why not? And let's start standing against the abuses of the federal government. Let's not go along with this anymore. We keep going along, it's just going to get worse. Yes, ma'am.
So you're saying that if we get a notice from the IRS that says they're going to audit us, we just go to our sheriff and say, take care of this, please?
Yeah, and I say that he and the county commissioners and the county attorney should be working up a process to let them know that's not going to happen and why. And you don't think that there's some things we can help you with on that? We can. And we've talked to a lot of lawyers about this.
But what has happened, so there was a case in Illinois, I believe it was, I can't remember exactly where the federal government, or the IRS, I should say, the Federal Reserve, seized a business owner's bank account and all his money and wouldn't tell him why they took it. They just said that he owed the debt.
Right.
He fought and fought and fought, never could get an answer.
Now-
So that's what happened. That's what I would be afraid. I've had it happen to me where
Right.
I took $2,000 out of my account.
My father got audited 3 years after he left the FBI. And we went through this as a family. And I can tell you, there are some solutions to this. It'd take a while to explain, but I promise you, we have some solutions on this, and it can happen. And we start working with local banks and credit unions, and ultimately, I'll tell you this, the sheriff talks to all the managers of the banks in your county, has a nice breakfast meeting with them and invites them in, and he says, I'm going to make a list, and it's going to be in the paper every month, which banks are IRS banks, in other words, the banks that will do whatever they're told by the IRS,
Right.
and over here we'll list all the people banks.
Yeah.
The ones that will work with the sheriff, do what we say, and help the people. Okay? Now, he will ask all, maybe with the county attorney with him, love to have that happen. He'll ask all those banks, which list do you want to be on? And if you do, and you start confiscating bank accounts and turning them over to the IRS without checking with us first, then we're going to tell you where you're going to end up on that. And now you tell me which bank are you going to bank with?
Sure.
I think that's pretty easy.
Sure.
But that's one of the things you do with those banks. Because just about everybody needs a bank sooner or later.
Yep.
And usually the credit unions are the ones that are most cooperative. Okay? But Wells Fargo, they're probably not going to be. Are they? Okay. Now, oh, I love this. We got to go over this. Thomas Paine was absolutely an astonishing influence and motivator in the Revolutionary War. George Washington was the same. But do you know what George Washington used? He used Thomas Paine. He had all his troops at Valley Forge read the American Crisis before they went back, motivated to go back to Trenton, going across the Delaware back to attack the Hessians and Redcoats who were celebrating Christmas in Trenton. Do you know how far that march was after they got off the boats? 20 miles in snow and ice in the worst blizzard ever. And one captain wrote in his journal, some of the men were naked in every sense of the word. And there was a little prose authored by one of them saying blood prints in the snow. And some of them left blood prints in the snow as they marched back. And it turned out, because they were so inspired, and this was so inspirational to them, and Washington was so inspiring, that they actually made the trail. And then they had the best Christmas ever. Because they won almost without firing a shot, only a few were killed. And they took all the ammunition, all the food, and all the clothes from the Hessians and Redcoats. And it was an amazing miracle. Because what did George Washington teach them? When you have dysentery, you're sick, you're deserting, you have no food, you have no clothes, you have no reason to fight, you're outmanned, outgunned, and outnumbered by 3 to 1. What do you do when your back's to the wall? You attack. My friends, what an amazing, miraculous inspiration. Washington and Paine. Washington was smart enough to have them read this. Now look at this. Britain with an army to enforce her tyranny, just like we have right now, the IRS and many other bureaucrats from Washington, D.C. Britain with an army to enforce her tyranny has declared that she has not only a right to tax, but to bind us in all cases whatsoever, called the British Declaratory Act. Now we were opposed to the Stamp Act, which was a stupid and huge tax on all paper goods. And actually Parliament and the King said, okay, we'll abolish that one. You feel better now? Okay, good, because we're going to declare the Declaratory Act. We're going to make that a law. And they did that the very same day that they got rid of the Stamp Act, just to teach you colonists a lesson. And what was the Declaratory Act? We can bind you in all cases whatsoever. And what did Paine call that? If that's not slavery, then there is not such a thing as slavery upon earth. See, the good pastor who gave the prayer talked about being free. And Dave sang about, or Jim talked about slavery. And that was, Roosevelt's quote was absolutely amazing. It's one of my favorite presidential quotes of all time. Get in the fight. We can't watch the parade anymore. We have to be in it. We have to be involved in this process. And let me reiterate this right now, so the good sheriff and everybody else knows this. This is a peaceful process. We do not advocate violence. We never have and we never will. We can do this peacefully. But to keep it that way, you're going to need local officials, especially your sheriff, on board. And you're going to need to be working with him and standing behind him. Do not ask your sheriff to do this alone.
All right.
Okay? It won't work. We the people have got to be involved in this with you, Sheriff. Okay? What is similar that we have now to the Declaratory Act? Obamacare, a Patriot Act, NDA. Okay? But if they can do Obamacare, what does that prove? They can do anything. Okay? Now Jennifer Long, she said she's an IRS agent. 1998, she testifies before Congress that the IRS used illegal tactics, sometimes illegally doing all sorts of things to people and fabricating evidence against American citizens. Fabricating evidence. Okay? It's not like we need any more evidence, but we got it then. What did they do then? They changed the name of the director. That's it. Okay? Now look at this. March 27, again, I don't make this stuff up, as crazy as it sounds. 2015, USA Today, written by Kevin Johnson. Okay, I didn't make this up. U.S. drug agents engaged in sex parties. Okay, who are they supposed to be fighting? The cartels, right? Yeah. The cartel supplied the prostitutes. This happened just barely a little over a year ago. And they had congressional hearings again. There's Trey Gowdy again. A lot of other Republicans shaking their fingers. Is this against the law? Taking prostitutes as bribes from the cartels that you're supposed to be fighting? I think so. Should they have been fired? Yeah. Did any of them get fired? No. Did any of them get prosecuted? No. Folks, this is typical of federal crimes. IRS agents, 1,100, are found cheating on their taxes. What happened to them? Oh, they got their bonuses just like everybody else. Bonuses for going after us. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. My friends, I don't make this up, but I have to ask. Of all these federal crimes, can we actually say it's okay that we're going to trust these guys to come into our counties and we're just going to let them go do whatever they want? BLM, let them do whatever they want. EPA, let them do whatever they want. USDA, let them do whatever they want. Why would we do that? Most of these people have committed crimes routinely. And the EPA, they just march into somebody's property without due process and they charge them $35,000 because they're building a home on their own property. But they had a little rain and they started a pond, and so they made it a Waters Act and said they're violating the Waters Act. This is how ridiculous it gets. And that actually happened to the Sackett family in Idaho. And they had, of course, to fight in court to keep what was already theirs. No, that's not how liberty works, folks. All of us stand for liberty, and we protect the Sackett family. And we protect each other in all of this. Now, this is Thomas Paine again. I know this is a little bit long, but hang with me. We'll just read this through together. What signifies it to me? Do you know what that means? What signifies it to me? What difference does it make to me? Whether he who destroys my property and kills or threatens to kill me is a king or a common man, my countrymen or not my countrymen, whether it be done by an individual villain or an army of them. If we reason to the root of things, we shall find no difference, neither can any just cause be assigned why we should punish in the one case and pardon in the other. Exactly what we do to all federal crimes in this country. They get away with everything, including Mr. Obama. Fast and Furious. Running hundreds and hundreds of guns down to Mexico. Hundreds of Mexicans are killed with those guns, and 2 Border Patrol agents. And what happened to Brian Terry's family trying to find out the truth? Stonewalled the whole time. How did Barack Obama get out of it? Declared executive privilege. And we let that go. The press said, oh, well, he declared executive privilege. Can't do anything about it now. What? The corruption of Washington, D.C., my friends, has got to be opposed county by county, state by state. It has to be, or it's going to just keep going. No, there is no hope in Washington, D.C., but we can make them irrelevant right here in our counties. They're not our boss. We don't need them. It is incontestable that the Constitution, now we're back to the Mack case. It is incontestable that the Constitution established a system of dual sovereignty. Although the states surrendered, Scalia's wrong here, and he actually corrects himself in a minute. We did not surrender anything, and it was not many powers. But he corrects it, so just so you know, this isn't my opinion here. To the new federal government, they, the states, retain a residuary and inviolable sovereignty. If Texas were inviolably sovereign, do you think you'd be able to run your own education, run your own land, run your own water, run your own health care? Oh, man. Run your own bathrooms? You think? Come on. So then he straightens it out. Right now, Scalia makes a huge comeback right here. Residual state sovereignty was also implicit, of course, in the Constitution's conferral upon Congress of not all governmental powers. Well, if they don't have all of them, what kind do they have? He says so. Discrete, enumerated ones. Very limited, in other words. And how now do we keep them that way? Scalia answers that question. Look, which implication is rendered express. Rendered express means absolute. by the 10th Amendment's assertion. Let me ask you. I'll ask any of you. Attorneys, sheriffs, everybody, mayors, all of you, constitutional scholars, Tea Party groups. Legally and lawfully and constitutionally, who has the obligation and responsibility to assert or enforce the 10th Amendment? Is there any way that's the federal government?
No.
Absolutely not. It's our duty. That's a state duty. The states must assert state sovereignty and states' rights. Or we're going to lose that. The federal government's the one destroying it. How are you going to turn to the one destroying it and say, oh, you got to fix that now? The people who caused the problem are not going to fix it. Okay? They're going to keep doing this. Okay? And then, so what? Remember what I told you? He quotes the 10th Amendment here. The word is delegated. We, the states, delegated certain powers. How many? Which ones? Enumerated and discrete. And you know, if you go through the whole Constitution, you know how many powers the federal government is given in the Constitution? About 32. In Article 1, Section 8, it's actually 17. Okay? That's all they get. They have 5 law enforcement authorities. 5! You know, let's go over real quick, okay? Protecting our borders. How they don't know, you like that? Okay? Counterfeiting, treason, felonies committed on the high seas, and laws against nations. So if you go to Mexico and you commit a crime there, you know, that's a federal offense and federal officers can get involved in it. 5. You know how many they've stolen? No. Far too many. The great innovation of this design was that our citizens would have 2 political capacities, one state and one federal. We all understand that. Get the next line. Each protected from incursion by the other. It's the state's job to protect you from incursions of other governments. As Madison expressed it, the local or municipal authorities form distinct and independent portions of the supremacy. Most lawyers will tell you the supremacy clause gives all authority and carte blanche to the federal government. That is a lie. They only get supremacy if what? What they do is pursuant to the Constitution. And they haven't followed the Constitution in decades. So their supremacy has been pretty much negated. Now, Scalia does, and I hope this isn't tedious for you here, because Scalia actually reinforces his solution. And what we're about at the CSPOA is solution. We're not, like I said, I didn't want to just come here and spew a bunch of my opinions. That's a waste of time. I'm the messenger, and I'm showing the evidence. Now, look at this. This separation of the 2 spheres, what 2 spheres? State and federal, very good. State and federal, is one of the Constitution's structural protections of liberty. Should we just go home now? We're not talking about anything important, are we? Just these little structural protections of liberty things. My dear friends, these last 3 slides are all right in here. It's in the decision. This is right from the decision. This is Scalia talking to us from the grave. Just as the separation and independence of the coordinate branches of the federal government serve to prevent the accumulation of excessive power in any one branch, here's the solution again. A healthy balance of power between the states and the federal government will reduce the risk of tyranny and abuse from either front. When you came to this meeting tonight, did you want to know how to reduce the risk of tyranny and abuse? Mm-hmm. There it is. A healthy balance of power between the states and the federal government. Do we have that balance today? No. Not even close. How do we take it back? The states have got to push back. And hard and strong. Just like with the money situation. We have got to push back. And it's peaceful, and it's lawful, and it's the right thing to do. If we're going to get freedom back in America, it's our only chance left. It is. It's the only way to keep this peaceful and still do it. Hence, a double security arises to the rights of the people. The different governments will control each other at the same time that each will be controlled by itself. Any question is whether or not the federal government will control itself?
No.
No question at all, is there? None. So who has to? We do. The power of the federal government would be augmented immeasurably. I want to show this so every person knows. They cannot do this. We can go along, and they can buy our way and bribe us into doing it. Would be augmented immeasurably if it were able to impress into its service and at no cost to itself the police officers of the 50 states. They can't, but they can buy their way in with grants, and we'll take it, and we'll allow it, and we'll surrender it. Can't do it. That's why you don't take those federal grants. They always have attachments and strings. The federal government, we held, may not compel the states to enact or administer a federal regulatory program. What does that do to Obamacare? What does that do to bathrooms? What does it do to their education mandates? Anything else. They cannot compel us to participate. And man, we need to start pushing back on that. Yeah.
Well, this leads me down a different avenue, but are you familiar with FirstNet?
With what?
FirstNet. I work in the wireless industry. FirstNet is
Oh,
the first
FirstNet.
responder network
Okay.
that the federal government is trying to force on all the sheriffs. A digital network run, managed by the federal government. And so I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are.
Anything on that, Sheriff?
The only thing we've heard was that I've been told last year at the conference, and then this year in July we'll have another conference. They started last year. I was under the understanding that it was a state-by-state thing. I hadn't heard that it was.
Well, the federal government's doling out the money to each state to run their own FirstNet network,
Okay.
which will be managed centrally by a group out of Washington, D.C. And it's digital, which means that the citizens can't listen in on it like we have now. We're able to monitor scanners and things like that. I mean, this gives them a private network to be able to operate on.
Something else to do now, huh, Sheriff?
I'll be asking more questions.
All right.
Okay, this is my favorite quote from the whole decision. And we're getting close to the end here. We're going to just show you 3 sheriffs after this, but look at that. But the Constitution protects us from our own best intention. Folks, that's the United States Supreme Court saying that. Justice Scalia warning us from the grave that we've got to be concerned about this. Because the Constitution protects us from our own best intention. Do you know how much government gets out of your life if we actually have that principle being obeyed? It divides power among sovereigns and among branches of government precisely so that we may resist the temptation to concentrate power in one location as an expedient solution to the crisis of the day. End quote. Have you ever heard that one? The crisis of the day? Barack Obama and Rahm Emanuel.
Never let a crisis go to waste.
Never let a good crisis go to waste, folks. And here's Scalia talking about it in 1997. And he's so right. Because you know what their motto is? Not just to not let it go to waste, but to create one if you have to.
That's right.
And they did with healthcare. They created that fiasco. They had to convince us that healthcare in America was the worst in the world. So you have to let us pass this 2,700 page of enslaving law. And there's no state that we should be going along with it. And what did Arizona's governor do? Jan Brewers, Miss Conservative Republican, and
Right.
she had this big old rally in front of the State House to accept a $2 billion bribe from Obama to expand Medicare and take Obamacare. She took the $2 billion. She was against Obama. She was against Obamacare, the ACA, until the state was offered $2 billion. She took it, and you know what it reminded me of? Star Wars. When they were all together in the Senate and they said, "How is liberty destroyed?" With thunderous applause. And she got thunderous applause by all her fans that came to thank her for taking that federal bribe. You got to be careful with that. We could have opposed it and stayed out of it. But no, she took the money. Okay, this reinforces the decision that what the federal government said, or what the Supreme Court said about the ruling. You can go over that yourself. This is Judge Roll. When I was on the witness stand, and I'm on the stand, and the attorney for the federal government is really painting me into a corner, and then finally she starts testifying. I'm standing right there, and she starts giving evidence herself. And I thought, of course, my attorney's going to object. He didn't. And I'm wondering why, and I'm so glad he didn't. And then after she said, well, Your Honor, we have 250,000 felons that have been denied access to guns just in the first 4 months of the implementation of the Brady Bill background checks. And I'm going, what a lot. But I'm just, I can't say anything. And my attorney isn't saying anything. I'm going, oh, why is he letting this go? And then Justice Scalia, Judge Roll rebukes her. And he says, Counselor, do not pretend in this courtroom that your statistical analysis somehow equates to constitutionality.
That is awesome.
Don't you love that? That is one of the most profound statements ever made in a court, and there it is. And I've actually written another book called The Magic of Gun Control. You can get that online. And it has a chapter dedicated to Judge Roll. Isn't it amazing? He's killed with a gun, and he didn't let this gun control law go. Wouldn't have stopped anything anyway. None of them did. But if I had been there that day, I probably could have saved it.
Front seats. Oh, well, make it loud themselves and let me have those seats.
She's arrested. An American citizen, for not obeying the laws of hate, prejudice, and segregation. She's arrested. She was booked into jail. She was photographed, fingerprinted, and booked into a jail cell. Can you imagine what her booking sheet said here? Failure to give her seat to a white man. Actually, we've studied it, and actually I think it said disorderly conduct. The catch-all for everything, huh? We don't know what else to call it. It's disorderly. This isn't just a tradition, it was a law. And my dear friends, that should have never happened. And we should have never heard of Rosa Parks. I apologize for that, but we should not have. We should have heard of the 2 deputies that refused to take her to jail. That's who we should have heard of. And this is all we're after. This is the only thing we want. Is sheriffs and deputies and law enforcement officials who know the difference between enforcing stupid laws and standing for what's right. You see, what should have happened is they should have gone up to Rosa Parks, sat down next to her, shook her hand, and escorted her home safely. And that's all we want for farmers and ranchers and Texans and Arizonans and everybody else who just wants to be left alone. And it's going to take some courage from sheriffs, from county attorneys, from public officials, and from we the people working with them and backing them and joining with us in the CSPUA to make sure that we can keep doing this and helping Sheriff Palmer in Oregon and Sheriff Finch in Florida and Sheriff Clark in Wisconsin and Sheriff Rogers in Indiana, and creating more and more of these sheriffs to where we have 1/4 of the sheriffs in this country who are standing and doing this. And then chiefs of police, we have some of them too. And chiefs of police are going to join the holy cause of liberty also. And this is going to roll all across America because it's the only solution we have left to keep this peaceful and to send this message to Washington. We will stand for liberty at all costs. We intend this to stay peaceful, and that's the way it's going to be. But if we just have one sheriff doing it here and one sheriff doing it there and a few people doing it here, it's not going to work. we've got to do this, and we've got to get together on this. And it's got to be what? Right now. And we need you to join us in this. And I want to just go over, before I close, I want to show you 3 more examples of sheriffs who have done this. Badge versus the badge. This is a story that came out of Range magazine in 2003, way before we were created. Yes, after my case, and a lot of the stuff that we had been doing, but yes, this started to take effect. And look at this, Gary Amon of Owee County, Idaho, made it clear that he did not want BLM help in local law enforcement and warned that he expected to be notified of any federal investigation or enforcement action, including impoundment of cattle the feds consider to be trespassing on U.S. property. Yeah. And then in San Bernardino, California, the sheriff did it there also. And we're not doing this in Texas? Come on. And he revoked the local law enforcement authority from the federal government in all 20,000 square miles of his county, and advised them to consult him first before taking any action on private property. That's all we want. Put them on notice. You check with me first. That's a check and balance system, and the Constitution is entirely a system of checks and balances. That's all we want. Make it messy. Interpose. Check on them. Don't let them walk over people. Okay? And now finally, Sheriff Jones in Eureka County, Nevada. What they really want is to extend federal authority over all law enforcement in the United States. Whether local people agree with it or not, says Jones, this is the statement we want. Well, it's not in this county. It's a simple statement. And these sheriffs won. And Sheriff Tony DeMeo stood up in Nye County, Nevada. And he would not allow the BLM to confiscate cattle there like they were trying to do at the Bundy Ranch. It's a tale of 2 sheriffs. In fact, that's exactly what this book is about. Are You a David is a tale of 2 sheriffs, and it tells those 2 stories. The sheriff who would do nothing and allowed the BLM to do whatever they wanted, or Sheriff Tony DeMeo, who told the BLM, you're not taking Wayne Haig's cattle. And you know what the BLM told him? We have a SWAT team, and we're coming back with our SWAT team. And you know what Tony DeMeo said? Fine, I have one too. Guess what? They didn't come back. And the rancher was protected. This is all we're after, folks. It's a simple process, but it's going to take courage. It's going to take dedication. We have all the tools you need at the CSPOA. None of this is for me. It's not. I'm 63 years old. I'm pretty much done. I've already had 2 heart attacks. Okay? I'm pretty much done. I don't care. I've had a wonderful life, a wonderful wife, 12 great grandkids. Not 12 wonderful grandkids. Not great grandkids. Not quite that old yet. I hope I live another 50 years. Whatever that is, it's up to God's good pleasure. But He has granted